we welcome you to the official podcast of the Fish Wrapper publication, bringing you story content to inspire, encourage, and uplift the soul. It's our hope you find these stories refreshing, thought-provoking, and motivating as you face the challenges of everyday life. So turn us up and tune your ears, and let's get started by jumping right into the story.
Thankful by Mary E. Wilkins Freeman. Narrated by Lauren LaRue. Submit Thompson sat on the stone wall. Sarah Adams, an erect, prim little figure, ankle-deep in dry grass, stood beside it, holding her precious doll, Thankful. Thankful was about 10 inches long, made of the finest linen, with little rosy cheeks and a fine little wig of flax. She wore a blue wool frock and a red cloak. Sarah held her close. She even drew a fold of her own blue homespun blanket around her to shield her from the November wind. The sky was low and gray. The wind blew from the northeast and had the breath of snow in it. Submit, on the wall, drew her quilted petticoats close down over her feet and huddled herself into a small space. But her face gleamed keen and resolute out of the depths of a great red hood that belonged to her mother. Her eyes were fixed upon a turkey gobbler ruffling and bobbing around the back door of the Adams house. The two gambrel-roofed Thompson and Adams houses were built as close together as if the little village of Bridgewater were a city. Acres of land stretched behind them and at the other sides, but they stood close to the road and close to each other. The narrow space between them was divided by a stone wall, which was Submit and Sarah's trysting place. They met there every day and exchanged confidences. They loved each other like sisters. Neither of them had an own sister, but today a spirit of rivalry had arisen. The tough, dry blackberry vines in the wall twisted around Submit. She looked, with her circle of red petticoat, like some strange late flower blooming out on the wall. "I know he don't, Sarah Adams," said she. "Father said he'd weigh 20 pounds, returned Sarah, in a small, weak voice. "I don't believe he will. Our Thanksgiving turkey is twice as big. You know he is, Sarah Adams." "No, I don't, Submit Thompson." "Yes, you do." Sarah lowered her chin and shook her head with a decision that was beyond words. She was a thin, delicate-looking little girl, her small blue-clad figure bent before the wind. But there was resolution in her high forehead and her sharp chin. Submit nodded violently. Sarah shook her head again. She hugged Thankful and shook her head, with her eyes still staring defiantly into Submit's hood. Submit's black eyes in the depths of it were like two sparks. She nodded vehemently. The gesture was not enough for her. She nodded and spoke together. "Sarah Adams, what will you give me if our turkey is bigger than your turkey?" "It ain't." "What will you give me if it is?" Sarah stared at Submit. "I don't know what you mean, Submit Thompson," said she, with a stately and puzzled air. "Well, I'll tell you. If your turkey weighs more than ours, I'll give you my little workbox with the picture on the top. And if our turkey weighs more than yours, you give me... What will you give me, Sarah Adams?" Sarah hung her flaxen head with a troubled air. "I don't know," said she. "I don't believe I've got anything Mother would be willing to have me give away." "There's Thankful. Your mother wouldn't care if you gave her away." Sarah started and hugged Thankful closer. "Yes, my mother would care too. Don't you know my Aunt Rose from Boston made her and gave her to me?" Sarah's beautiful young Aunt Rose from Boston was the special admiration of both the little girls. Submit was ordinarily impressed by her name, but now she took it coolly. "What if she did?" she returned. "She can make another. It's just made out of a piece of old linen anyhow. My workbox is real handsome." but you can do just as you have a mind to. Do you mean I can have the workbox to keep? Inquired Sarah. Of course I do, if your turkey's bigger. Sarah hesitated. Our turkey is bigger anyhow, she murmured. Don't you think I ought to ask Mother Submit? She inquired suddenly. No. What for? I don't see anything to ask your mother for. She won't care anything about that rag doll. Ain't you going to ask your mother about the workbox? No, replied Submit stoutly. It's mine. My grandmother gave it to me. Sarah reflected. I know our turkey is the biggest, she said, looking lovingly at Thankful, as if to justify herself to her. Well, I don't care, she added finally. Will you? Yes. When's yours going to be killed? This afternoon. So's ours. Then we'll find out. Sarah tucked Thankful closer under her shawl. I know our turkey is the biggest. She looked very sober, although her voice was defiant. Just then, the great turkey came swinging through the yard. He held up his head proudly and gobbled. His every feather stood out in the wind. He seemed enormous, a perfect giant among turkeys. Look at him, said Sarah, edging a little closer to the wall. She was rather afraid of him. He ain't half so big as ours, returned Submit stoutly, but her heart sank. The Thompson turkey did look very large. Submit! Submit! Called a voice from the Thompson house. Submit slowly got down from the wall. His feathers are a good deal thicker than ours, she said defiantly to Sarah. Submit! Called the voice. Come right home. I want you to pare apples for the pies. Be quick. Yes, marm, Submit answered back in a shrill voice. I'm coming! Then she went across the yard and into the kitchen door of the Thompson house, like a red robin into a nest. Submit had been taught to obey her mother promptly. Mrs. Thompson was a decided woman. Sarah looked after Submit. Then she gathered Thankful closer and also went into the house. Her mother, as well as Mrs. Thompson, was preparing for Thanksgiving. The great kitchen was all of a pleasant litter with pie plates and cake pans and mixing bowls, and full of warm, spicy odors. The oven in the chimney was all heated and ready for a batch of apple and pumpkin pies. Mrs. Adams was busy sliding them in, but she stopped to look at Sarah and Thankful. Sarah was her only child. Why, what makes you look so sober? Said she. Nothing, replied Sarah. She had taken off her blanket and sat in one of the straight-backed kitchen chairs, holding Thankful. You look dreadful sober, said her mother. Are you tired? No, marm. I'm afraid you've got cold standing out there in the wind. Do you feel chilly? No, marm. Mother, how much do you suppose our turkey weighs? I believe Father said he'd weigh about 20 pounds. You are sure you don't feel chilly? No, marm. Mother, do you suppose our turkey weighs more than Submit's? How do you suppose I could tell? I haven't set eyes on their turkey lately. If you feel well, you'd better sit up to the table and stir in that bowl of raisins. Put your dolly away and get your apron. But Sarah stoned raisins with Thankful in her lap, hidden under her apron. She was so full of anxiety that she could not bear to put her away. Suppose the Thompson turkey should be larger, and she could lose Thankful. Thankful that her beautiful Aunt Rose had made for her. Submit, over in the Thompson house, had sat down at once to her apple paring. She had not gone into the best room to look at the workbox, whose possession she had hazarded. It stood in there on the table made of yellow, satiny wood, with a sliding lid ornamented with a beautiful little picture. Submit had a certain pride in it, but her fear of losing was not equal to her hope of possessing Thankful. Submit had never had a doll, except a few homemade ones manufactured secretly out of corn cobs, whom it took more imagination than she possessed to admire. Gradually, all emulation over the turkeys was lost in the naughty coveting of her little friend and neighbor's doll. Submit felt shocked and guilty, but she sat there paring the apples and thinking to herself, if our turkey's only bigger, if it only is, then I shall have Thankful. Her mouth was pursed up and her eyes snapped. She did not talk at all, but pared very fast. Her mother looked at her. "If you don't take care, you'll cut your fingers," said she. "You are in too much of a hurry. I suppose you want to get out and gossip with Sarah again at the wall, but I can't let you waste any more time today." "There, I said you would." Submit had cut her thumb quite severely. She choked a little when her mother tied it up and put on some balm of Gilead, which made it smart worse. "Don't cry," said her mother. "You'll have to bear more than a cut thumb if you live." Submit fought back the tears. She came from a brave race and had to prove she was worthy. Submit finished paring the apples after her thumb was tied up, although she was rather awkward about it. Then she pounded spices in the mortar and picked over cranberries. Her mother kept her busy every minute until dinner time. When Submit's father and her two brothers, Thomas and Jonas, had come in, she began on the subject nearest her heart. "Father," said she, "how much do you think our Thanksgiving turkey will weigh?" Mr. Thompson was a deliberate man. He looked at her a minute before replying. 17 or 18 pounds, replied he. "Oh, Father, don't you think he will weigh 20? Mr. Thompson shook his head. "He don't begin to weigh so much as the Adams turkey," said Jonas. "Their turkey weighs 20 pounds. "Oh, Thomas, do you think their turkey weighs more than ours?" cried Submit. Thomas was her elder brother. He had a sober, judicial air like his father. "Their turkey weighs considerable more than ours," said he. Submit's face fell. "You are not showing the right spirit," said her mother severely. "Why should you care if the Adams turkey does weigh more?" Submit said no more. She ate her dinner soberly. Afterward, she wiped dishes while her mother washed. All the time she was listening. Her father and brothers had gone out. Presently, she started. "Oh, Mother, they're killing the turkey!"
We hope you've been enjoying the story. We will continue in just a moment. We want to remind you that the Fish Wrapper is available by subscription. Each issue of the Fish Wrapper is jam-packed, full of story content, amazing recipes to delight your kitchen table, games, jokes, and much, much more. Don't miss an issue. Order yours today. Visit us at thefishwrapperonline.com or by calling 717-400-FISH. That number again is 717-400-FISH. Now let's return and finish the story.
As soon as the dishes were set away, she stole out to the barn where her father and brothers were picking the turkey. "Father, when are you going to weigh him?" she asked timidly. "Not till tonight," said her father. "Submit!" called her mother. Submit went in and swept the kitchen floor. It was an hour after that, when her mother was in the south room getting it ready for her grandparents who were coming home to Thanksgiving. They had been on a visit to their youngest son, that Submit crept slyly into the pantry. The turkey lay there on the broad shelf before the window. Submit looked at him. She thought he was small. He was most all feathers. Suddenly her eyes flashed and a red flush came over her face. It was as if someone had whispered in her ear. Presently, Submit stole softly back into the kitchen, set a chair before the chimney cupboard, climbed up, and got the pewter dish that held some old Revolutionary bullets. Then she stole back to the pantry and emptied the bullets into the turkey's crop. Then she got a needle and thread from her mother's basket, sewed up the crop carefully, and set the empty dish back in the cupboard. She had just stepped down out of the chair when her brother Jonas came in. "Submit," said he. "Let's have one game of odd or even with the bullets." "I am too busy," said Submit. "I've got to spin my stint." "Just one game. Mother won't care." "No, I can't." Submit flew to her spinning wheel in the corner. Jonas strolled into the pantry. "I don't believe Mother wants you in there," Submit said anxiously. "See here, Submit," Jonas called out in an eager voice. "I'll get the scales and we'll weigh the turkey. We can do it as well as anybody." Submit left her spinning wheel. She was quite pale with trepidation when Jonas and she adjusted the turkey in the scales. What if those bullets should rattle out? But they did not. "He weighs 20 pounds and a quarter," announced Jonas with a gasp, after peering anxiously at the figures. "He's the biggest turkey that was ever raised in these parts." Jonas exulted a great deal, but Submit did not say much. As soon as Jonas had laid the turkey back on the shelf and gone out, she watched her chance and removed the bullets, replacing them in the pewter dish. When Mr. Thompson and Thomas came home at twilight, there was a great deal of talk over the turkey. "The Adams turkey doesn't weigh but 19 pounds, Jonas announced. "Sarah was out there when they weighed him, and she most cried." "I think Sarah and Submit and all of you are very foolish about it," said Mrs. Thompson severely. "What difference does it make if one weighs a pound or two more than the other if there was enough to go round?" "Submit looks as if she was sorry ours weighed the most now," said Jonas. "My thumb aches," said Submit. "Go and get the balm of Gilead bottle and put some more on," ordered her mother. That night, when Submit went to bed, she could not say her prayers. When she woke in the morning, it was with a strange, terrified feeling, as if she had climbed a wall into some unknown, dreadful land. She wondered if Sarah would bring Thankful over. She dreaded to see her coming, but she did not come. Submit herself did not stir out of the house all that day or the next, and Sarah did not bring Thankful until next morning. They were all out in the kitchen about an hour before dinner. Grandfather Thompson sat in his old armchair at one corner of the fireplace. Grandmother Thompson was knitting, and Jonas and Submit were cracking butternuts. Submit was a little happier this morning. She thought Sarah would never bring Thankful, and so she had not done so much harm by cheating in the weight of the turkey. There was a tug at the latch of the kitchen door. It was pushed open slowly and painfully, and Sarah entered with Thankful in her arms. She said not a word to anybody, but her little face was full of woe. She went straight to Submit and laid Thankful in her lap. Then she turned and fled with a great sob. The door slammed after her. All the Thompsons stood and looked at Submit.
"Submit, what does this mean?"
her father asked. Submit looked at him, trembling. "Submit, mind your father," said Mrs. Thompson. "What did she bring you the doll baby for?" asked Grandmother Thompson. "Sarah was going to give me Thankful if our turkey weighed most, and I was going to give her my workbox if hers weighed most," said Submit jerkily. Her lips felt stiff. Her father looked very sober and stern. He turned to his father. When Grandfather Thompson was at home, everyone deferred to him. Even at 80, he was the recognized head of the house. He was a wonderful old man and full of grave dignity. He looked at Submit, and she shrank. "Do you know," said he, "that you have been conducting yourself in a very unbecoming manner?" "Yes, sir," murmured Submit, although she did not know what he meant. "No godly maid who heeds her elders will take part in any such foolish and sinful wager," her grandfather continued. Submit arose, hugging Thankful convulsively. She glanced frantically about her and said, "Our turkey didn't weigh the most. I put the Revolutionary bullets in his crop." There was silence. Submit's heart beat so hard that Thankful quivered. "Go upstairs to your chamber, Submit," said her mother, "and you need not come down to dinner. Jonas, take that doll and carry it over to the Adams house." Submit crept miserably out of the room, and Jonas carried Thankful across the yard to Sarah. Submit crouched beside her little square window set with tiny panes of glass and watched him. She did not cry. She was very miserable, but confession had awakened a salutary smart in her soul, like the balm of Gilead on her cut thumb. She was not so unhappy as she had been. However, she did wonder what further punishment she might receive. After Jonas came back, she still crouched at the window. Exactly opposite in the Adams house was another little square window, and that lighted Sarah's chamber. All of a sudden, Sarah's face appeared there. The two little girls stared pitifully at each other. Presently, Sarah raised her window and put a stick under it, then Submit did the same. They put their faces out and looked at each other a minute before speaking. Sarah's face was streaming with tears. "What you crying for?" called Submit softly. "Father sent me up here 'cause it is sinful to make bets, and Aunt Rose is coming. I can't have any Thanksgiving dinner," wailed Sarah. "I'm wickeder than you," said Submit. "I put the revolutionary bullets in the turkey to make it weigh more than yours. Yours weighed the most. If Mother thinks it's right, I'll give you the workbox." "I don't want it," sobbed Sarah. "I'm dreadful sorry you've got to stay up there and can't have any dinner, Submit." Answering tears sprang to Submit's eyes. "I'm dreadful sorry you've got to stay up there and can't have any dinner either," she sobbed back. There was a touch on her shoulder. She looked around, and there stood the grandmother. She was trying to look severe, but she was beaming kindly on her. Her fair old face was as gentle as the mercy that tempers justice. Her round spectacles and her knitting needles and the gold beads on her neck all shone in the sunlight. "You had better come downstairs, child. Dinner's most ready, and maybe you can help your mother. Your father isn't going to punish you this time because you told the truth about it. But you mustn't ever do such a dreadful, wicked thing again." "No, I won't," sobbed Submit. She looked across, and there beside Sarah's face in the window was another beautiful, smiling one, with pink cheeks and sweet black eyes. "Oh, Submit!" Sarah called out joyfully. "Aunt Rose says I can go down to dinner." "Grandmother says I can," called back Submit. The beautiful, smiling face opposite leaned close to Sarah's for a minute. "Oh, Submit!" cried Sarah. "Aunt Rose says she will make you doll baby-like thankful if your mother's willing." "I guess she'll be willing if she's a good girl," called Grandmother Thompson. Submit looked across a second in speechless radiance. Then the faces vanished from the two little windows, and Submit and Sarah went downstairs to their Thanksgiving dinners. The end.
We hope you enjoyed the story, and will join us again soon when we unravel another adventure from the pages of the Fish Wrapper. We encourage you to like and subscribe to this podcast, ensuring you never miss a new episode. See you again soon, and may our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ guide you.